discovery effort, which was multi-organization and multi-country effort, which was able to try and like pull out meaningful potential drugs for diseases which usually don't get attention from multinational organizations. Professor Shobha has been involved in organizing the Open Susi conference. She's been a very active member of the community, and she's the co-chair of the Open Susi conference that is happening in India, in Delhi, in a month. Mr. Karki, like we mentioned earlier, like is the founder, and he is helping organize the Viluppuram GNU Linux user group, which has been helping students understand and build expertise in open source and like technology in general. And Professor Vigneshwara at from IIT Delhi, he has been understanding ICT for development, and he's been using open source technology to be able to understand a lot of these things. So in that context, we have three broad questions. I want to understand all of your learned experience on how we can bring more open source into the curriculum. I want to understand how we can get more open source adoption and open source creation from academia. And yeah, let's start with both of those things.
Okay, just take the last two questions. See, academia is where much of software and open source started. So to assume that it's not had its credibility or its impact is not very fair. But I want to qualify that a little bit, is that the whole concept of education has changed in the last 30 years. And it's the deliverables of education. People like my friend Kishore calls us our generation FOSS kids. And it's probably appropriate because we had two lives, the life before the internet and the life after. And it was because we learned in the life before the internet, the university's base was a library and the resources from laboratories and instrumentation that we had. And the knowledge that you disseminated was the knowledge of your teachers. So you were really the sage on the stage, that you were passing on knowledge to your students. And it's very, very different since, because knowledge is very, very democratized, and we've had it in the last 20 years in my career as a teacher. Initially with search, then you had accumulated knowledge through databases which were constructivist like Wikipedia. And in many cases, why I'm bringing this up is in many cases you have to fight in academia that to use this was incorrect. The example is Wikipedia is not correct versus something like an expert written Encyclopedia Britannica. Similarly, FOSS is tinkering and is not equivalent to something that is production ready. So you should train people on SAP, you should train people on standards that are used in industry if you're educating them. Now fortunately, if I take this now back to where we were, fortunately I come from JNU, which is known for its activist sort of attitude, so it was relatively easy to put this in because nobody expects very much of SAP users coming out from JNU. They SAP government, but they don't really SAP it. So what we do is that the first thing that we did was deploy FOSS with the infrastructure requirement. Now in around 2002 and 2003, we built a high-performance computer facility, which is the largest in a computer setting, in a university setting. And these were clusters of computers. It cost about 2.5 to 3 crores at that time, which is a significant amount even today. But at that time, it was very, very high. It used only FOSS. And at that time, Linux had matured. It was only about 10 years old. But we had a stack that could run on high-performance computing. And it was using it for scientific computing. So it raised our ability to compete without any entry costs. The second thing was when we deployed a computer center, we deployed it only with Linux, with GNU Linux, as Richard Stallman keeps mentioning. It's not just plain Linux. Now see, the student that was exposed to this, it was the first time that they were exposed to a computer. So they did not come ready to use Windows. And the learning that they had was so much more, because first you had access to the internet, which was through a browser, but then you had to learn how to use the computer also. And therefore the FOSS gave them that ability. The computer science students were deploying SQL directly rather than using some sort of standards. So see, the ambience in which you are makes it much more easy. It was not so easy to do this in an engineering college that was producing students that demanded certain standards that they wanted from the output. And that was only for the last two questions, such as how you deploy it. That was how we deployed it, and I don't want to hog the time of everyone else, so we pass it on. Yeah. Oh, you have. No, go down, Robert. Speak. I was passing you the mic, but you can speak.
Yeah, again, how do we get more open source coming out of academia, and how do we get more both students and faculty acknowledging the use of open source and actively using and creating open source?
I come from a private engineering college. Their faculty, they can use open source, but they are not contributing to open source. So they only know how we use open source, but even we are not using open source. We all are working on Windows, all the faculty members, and they even don't wants to work on GitHub. I think so. It's really very important to bring open source importance in industry, in universities, in education, that academic faculty members they start using it, understand its importance, and it cannot be possible until unless we bring it and make it mandatory for each and everyone to use it. Until unless we make it mandatory, no one is going to use it because they are very comfortable using their own old systems. And I come to FOSS in 2011, and I wanted to contribute to open source, and by anyhow I wanted to be the outreach program for women intern. So I worked very hard, but it is difficult. First time it is really difficult, but once you are accustomed to using it, it is not at all difficult. So we actually have to cut that barrier. It's difficult to use. Once we start using it, I don't think it is a big thing. So the one thing is we have to make it mandatory for faculty members and then to students. And this way we can make it open source common for all. I think so.
Yes, from the academic side, so actually saying I'm not from the technical background here. Not even know a single line of code of computer. If you give me something printed version of code, I will ask, is this code? That's how much of knowledge I'm having. But the FOSS, so software, the principles brought me here all the way. So the thing is, from the academic side, even today itself, till today, the 10% of premier institution in India might be called IIT, MIT or IIT, this kind of institution. Apart from this 10% of institution, other than 90% of institutions are still they have stick with the proprietary software where they can be installed, rebooted, everything will be onto their lab. If their OS crashed means the students calling the lab assistant to make it up. If this is the situation. Why I am saying from the academic and syllabus side, they focusing on user. They are producing a user, engineering as a user, not the developer. We need to be on make the curriculum and syllabus like the premium institution standard. Because when we are getting the students enrolling to the rural tier 2, tier 3 cities in India, the background of this social impact of their students, the more inaccessible to the modern era, where you cannot be on do a practice on their home itself with the laptop or something, some minimal cost of systems. They don't have it. The only provision is that their laboratories, their college institution laboratories, where the laboratories are fully with the proprietary system. If they having syllabus, nowadays some of the universities introduced the credits for the FOSS. So supposed to be fortunately some of the system having Linux, Ubuntu, all those things. There they can see which will be on no, some specialized person come and on that system, some specialized person teach about the Linux, Ubuntu, all these things. So this is the ground level situation from the academic. Might be some exception will be there. So what I'm trying to say is the academic from the elementary level or the higher and higher education level, the FOSS has to be get introduced to various team and various sector. What are the application industry readiness? Now we are speaking about industry readiness 4.0. So as the earlier panel members, BFSI sector, they were the wonderful. Like this kind of advanced, this kind of industrial oriented developments has to be bring to the academic side for the R&D also. So then it will be some add-ons. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I will take a different take. The larger backend systems, open source is already in education institutions. I'm looking at B2C kind of context, the everyday users, students and community. Right, as of now it's not really happening. I look at my colleagues at IIT Delhi. I also handle a program at the University of Queensland, Australia. The situation is more or less same. So irrespective of where you are located, things are same. Right, I would say based on my own experience, I would say we need kind of influencers or some celebrities in the campus to take things forward. For instance, 15 years ago, Ubuntu used to sell CDs for an operating system. And when they supply the CDs, they also give a sticker which you can put it on your door. So I used to get that 25 CDs and I put a sticker on my door. I don't tell anyone, I don't say anything about this. People used to knock on comments, ask things, what is this all about? Can I get a CD? Can I install it and use it? Right, within 2 weeks, I was able to kind of give away these 25 CDs. Right, in IIT Delhi campus, your learning management systems, your mail and your or the cloud, everything was done by students. There is a faculty member in computer science got excited about it, and he said, okay, I will give design credits to the students who are able to implement it. The entire thing was done by students. A faculty member who is working as an influencer says that, why don't you do this? I will give you design credits. So the question here is, I need to find out this influencer, somebody is able to take this responsibility and implement it in the organization. This is very important, that's one. In a room full of open source enthusiasts, I'm not sure whether I can say this or not. As a community, you also need to come up with the better products which can replace the proprietary software. For instance, if you take any undergraduate students, I teach MBA students, they use extensive PPTs, right? Their life is full of these PPTs. If you are able to come up with a better products, not a duplication, not an imitation of an existing product, if you are able to come up with a better product, if it is an open source, people will pick it up quickly, anytime. As of now, we do not have any products related to this front-end ones. The students community end up using this proprietary software because you don't have any good alternatives. Once that happens, the adoption is going to become a lot more quicker. Plus, you also need to have that influencers who are able to tell people saying that this is what is available, why don't you take it? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. It's very interesting because both like Professor Andrew and Professor Vignesh, like what you said, right? Like one of the common things that I'm able to pull out, which I've also personally experienced, is there are like again like these influencer professors who end up saying that no, you know what, I'm going to champion open source on my campus and I'm going to take the responsibility to be able to push things forward to a certain extent. And again, like you've given a great example, right? Like the professor said, oh, I'll give you design credits to be able to do some of this work. So that actually leads me to the next question, which is, has this been a common pattern across institutes where we've been able to have some of these champions convince faculty, convince other departments that say, look, we'll give credits for some of this work so that we are actually able to get them to do some of the meaningful work? And is there enough independence currently in some of the systems to be able to do these sorts of experiments? Can we grow some of these things?
Right. Most of the educational institutions have some kind of mechanism to encourage this independent thinking among the students. Some form or the other, the terminology may be different, but design credits are available. Right now, it is clearly available told to the students. And there are faculty members who are familiar with this. This is very common. Students come into your room and say that I would like to do something on this summer. I want design credits from you, right? So if you are able to, as a community, if you are able to list out the projects, and if you are able to find people in academia and say that these are the projects are available, and if any students are coming, why don't you encourage them? If that particular connection is made, and life is going to be a lot more easier. That's one. The second one is, if you look at, based on my experience interacting with even undergraduate level various programs, I'm talking about programs like BBA in tier 2 universities, everybody is interested in doing summer internships and various other things. Right? There is a constant pressure on these kids to do some kind of internships, either during the second year or third year. Right? Is it possible for us to really connect, saying that, okay, what do we use it? It is not necessarily about programming all the time. So we are talking about NGOs who are looking for certain applications, and you have a list of applications available. This intern will take these applications, take to these NGOs and deploy it. So those kind of connecting, bridging work also can be done by these people. So you need to have a larger number of people doing this. If you are able to enable it, is well and good. Okay. The second one is in terms of whether the faculty members will look at a particular tool, whether they take it to the classroom, explain it. That happens a lot more. And in terms of citing, saying that this particular tool has been used in this particular research work, that is also happening. If you look at a lot of research papers, this is happening. Okay, and a level above, certain, say University of Amsterdam has released a software called JASP, which basically replaces proprietary SPSS. If somebody is looking at neural networks or linear programming you want to do, this is a completely user-friendly software which can be used. But it's completely developed by University of Amsterdam, and it is kept online for people to download it. And what they say is, when you are using it, you need to cite. They also give a citation saying that you are supposed to use it. There are various universities that are developing this particular software and doing it. So what are the ways of doing it? You go and find out on what basis they are doing it, why are they doing it, is it possible for me to replicate in Indian universities? So when Indian universities they do it, they are closer to the student community, they clearly understand what they are really looking for it, we should be able to replicate this model. Thank you.
Professor Andrew, Professor Shobhat, can you have a comment or have any thoughts on that?
For helping students using FOSS.
Again, have you seen similar cases? Have you seen similar cases of a faculty member supporting and championing open source in this way? And does the faculty member also have the academic freedom to be able to give design credits or credits for like some sort of open source work by the students?
As such, we are promoting project-based learning in our college. So in this project-based learning, we ask students in their lab projects, lab programs they do in laboratories. We ask them at the end of the lab course, they have to develop some simple projects, and if they develop those projects on by using open source softwares, or they contribute somewhere. So if they are successfully able to contribute to open source software, or they are developing some software with collaboration among themselves, we definitely give them credits for that.
Professor Andrew?
I see, the thing is that in many ways, I agree that open source software is the base now. It's actually the utilization. For example, it's very domain specific. PPT is not important for physicists for over 30 years, over 40 years. They've been using LaTeX, they can't fit equations into PPTs at all. And biologists use PPTs because we like slides with images on it and things like that. But those are, if you look at the data analysis software, since you mentioned SPSS, we've been using Python stacks along with R forever. And it's really how you can scale it. So you have a learning machine, which is a desktop level machine, and then you must have servers. For example, in our department, and it's not such a big department, we have 3 machines, and we've had them for 15 years, which have over 1 terabyte RAM, because some of the matrices that you need for doing this kind of calculation. And these are the kind of things. We have GPUs which are meant for them. You need to build the hardware back-end resource to run the free software. The free software is freely available. It's not that. It's being able to deploy it. Now comes the second part of it. In many cases, adopting a new technology is also very age dependent. Now this fossil term comes in, is that we get used to a certain kind of stack that we are used to, and it may not be what industry is requiring of students, and students know much better what they want. And this is far, far more prevalent in the IT versus the hard science field. The hard science is still dependent on learning a lot of theory, but you are very agile in your learning in the IT industry. And to be honest, you don't care very much about your professors, with due respect to Shobha, because really speaking, I've been following this in the IITs and even at other places. They used to come across to do dissertations in our department because applying it in another university was useful for their applications. It dried up about 10 years ago. So I want to find out why. They are not interested about the badge of being in the IIT. Their CVs depend on how much they've contributed on GitHub projects, on what they've utilized. So now they will come to us to use the kind of resources. The free software is all over there. So what we have to do is we have to scale the application of the software. Here's an example. I like AMD. I like AMD because we like taking in the underdog. You cannot do proper data science using an AMD GPU because everything is built on CUDA libraries, which is NVIDIA proprietary. So can I interest a student to write out an equivalent library to do this? Now this is a very long-term project. So this is where, to answer the question a little longer, is how you have to break up using what we've learned from FOSS into deploying this as a contribution. You have to break the project into its ability to be distributed. It's not going to be done in your lab. It has to be done by much larger people, by larger numbers of people. It has to be made granular. It has to be made modular. It is not a single practical that you would use. These become much larger projects. And when you're doing this, I had a good experience because we learned how to design a drug for tuberculosis using the same principles of open source, the topic that they were talking about with open source drug discovery. Now here's the bad part. Now I got promoted anyway because I managed to publish some papers. If you get enmeshed into trying to learn a technology that is not going to give you any promotional advantages or advantages in your salary scale, it's not going to be done. So that first point, or rather your point, about having faculty who are not interested in it, what is the incentive for them to be interested in it? It is, the free software is easily available. If the free software is not a skill that students are going to use, that's not going to be something that the education institution is going to actually provide as a skill. So the deployment of free software is dependent on where you're using it and how it's being used as a skill. And it's almost one step away from it. Like I said, actually it's your point. There is no question about the fact that free software is used. The question is, are we actually building anything that is significant with free software and contributing back within the country and within our education institutions? That's not happening to the level it should be happening. But are they contributing to international projects? Very much so. So we are nodes, but we are not really hubs in the contributing projects.
So I just wanted to add like one other small thing relating to what you were mentioning. I'm definitely paraphrasing here, but the 2014 policy on open source adoption in the government of India technically says that they are going to acknowledge institutes for the most amount of open source contributions and creation. They're going to acknowledge faculty members who create the most amount of open source and put it out. So one question I keep coming across is, like, again, it's all about incentives, and it's all about incentives. Is there anything we can do about incentives where we are actually able to say, look, you can't just count the number of papers that have been published and the number of citations. Can we also look at some sort of an index for how impactful the open source projects are that have been put out by this person in the lab, right? Like, do you think that's like possible at all?
Sorry, I think I switched it on by accident. Yes, it's very much possible. But the point is it an endpoint or is it something that you're using? Is FOSS development the objective or is the utilization of FOSS the objective? You know, that becomes one of the marks at which you're using it. For example, we have a very good economist on our department who's very, very FOSS friendly. Now, he is not going to spend his time doing software development, but he definitely spends a lot of time with understanding what are the best software tools and the deployment of such software tools that should be used. So there are different levels at which it is. Now, I am handling different types of data, and they are scaling to levels at which normal databases and normal computing does not work. So I want to be able to move towards other kinds of systems. So I need to also move towards being able to develop it. So now here is where, you see, there is a material cost involved, and a material cost comes in, I mentioned hardware that runs the free software at the level and scales that you're looking at. But I'm also mentioning support for manpower. You cannot continuously expect this to be gratis. There has to be a source of funding, and it has to go in towards funding expertise that comes in to contribute towards these projects. Universities can be crucibles for it, but you're not going to expect a 50-year-old to be able to develop the kind of software that actually a 15-year-old can do, not just because of the intensity of power, but because of the way that they are working with and what they're doing. So the design aspects and the overall mentoring can be in place, but the actual contribution will have to be through a larger teamwork. And that also is not very easy. We're used to collaborating, but now a lot of these projects are partly outsourced. Okay. So when you mentioned that the policy of 2014, that policy has to also be supported with government funding for provisioning for these. And this is not happening. And I'm not sure whether there was some mention also of the utilization in industry, like Zerodha and others are using it. How much are they paying to be able to support this? Google Summer of Code is funded by Google. So it's time that Indian industry and the Indian government starts actually funding projects. Now the traditional way of funding may not be useful. You can follow the way the software industry works, such as with hackathons and others. And hackathons are a very good learning experience. They also give you the equivalent of what was talked about earlier, such as design credits. But you're not giving design credits for simply deployment. Now you're actually building and you're doing this. And I don't know, Kishore, you used to run it in FOSS.in and Field.in. There were hackathons run quite regularly on the site. So see, these conferences also need to be done much more often. And the learning experience is not necessarily in the citadel that was a university. The university is now everywhere. It's just a space in which you come back. So I think we should look at the changing atmosphere and the aspect of the universities.
Yeah.
Okay, one more suggestion, not so popular one. Academics also likes a lot of recognition, right? As a community, you need to institute an award, right? Every year you call a professor, call a minister, put a big stage and say that the guy is the person who has come up with a big project on a FOSS, so we would like to acknowledge this. You say this and give a certificate. Okay, money is not a great driver for faculty members. These awards makes a lot of difference, right? They put there in the CV, put there in the website, they take it to the institute, and they tell their director, the institute put it in the website. During the promotions, that will be considered positively because you brought some social change. So in the place of more number of papers, the less paper, but one good award recognized by everyone makes a difference. So this possibility you can think of.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. Sorry, Karen.
Yes. I want to add here before Professor Vignesh stated the community bridge. So where the academic and the FOSS communities, wherever around the India, the FOSS communities are there are so many communities on every towns and cities, metropolitan cities. So the communities has to be taken forward to bridging with these institutions where they can approach about. And the institutions also taking up the communities into their campus for making utilizing their knowledge sharing or development program and the industry, current industry, FOSS industry is needed. For that way the GNU Linux is group operating. But no, nowadays the scenario will be on the college itself, GNU Linux is group has been established, but the functioning is has to be set up benchmarks. The functioning has to be set up some guidelines the industry people from the FOSS has to be gaining some protocols or guidelines has to be followed for the club meetings. Then only they from the academic side what they are thinking it's a another club. It's another club. So for as a industry people, we have a responsibility to standardize the meetups. And from the academic people, they have to recognize these clubs in their campus. The mutual bridging has been happened. Then it will pick it up like.
Open source is all.
You can use this.
Open source is all about collaboration. Collaboration. So we can develop projects which are developed collaboratively within universities, IITs, private institutes, students. Students can pick up any project of their interest and collaboratively all universities across India or world. If we are developing projects like there is a project like FOSS, humanitarian FOSS. So such projects they are they include SDGs into them also. So such projects they make their students socially contributors, social contributors. So such projects must be brought to students to contribute. And it's not that the one institution is developing any open source project or any applications on this, but we should develop open source projects collaboratively among colleges all over India, all over the world. And they must definitely be they must be what we say appreciated, faculty members or students, and only then things can be made common things can develop. Because if we don't bring any ecosystem for FOSS, it's not at all possible. Independently, we cannot do, and if there is no government support, nobody can do. I don't think it's very easy because every FOSS lover is promoting FOSS because they know its potential, they know its importance. But the one who doesn't know FOSS, it's very difficult to bring them in. This is what I think.
Yeah, I'm adding something. See, the recognition is different. The faculties expecting the recognition for promotions and hikes. The students looking for the recognition for their talents. The talents and the promotions are really different in the same campus. Between this, the FOSS has to be going to play the role. So while the FOSS has been adapted by the faculties on which purpose, the FOSS has been adapted by the students on which purpose. The purpose has to be meant on mutually, then the spark will be on. I think so.
There is one more suggestion to improve the adoption in educational institutions. We have a middle layer in Indian universities and institutions, which is not really recognized by anyone. One is the faculty members takes a lot of decisions. Here in Indian institutions, to buy computers, tendering, everything is done by faculty members, they sign everything. And the bottom one is student community who uses. The middle layer is who provide this infrastructure. They call it computer service center or IT administrator or everyone. They don't take a lot of decisions, they are kind of invisible to people, right? Whenever a new academic year starts, the students come in, the information about the infrastructure in their campus is not given to them by anyone. They learn it themselves, talking to their seniors and everything. Induction program, maybe there is one slide, they say that, okay, this is available, figure it out. So if you are able to empower that middle layer, saying that, okay, these are the set of tools that are available and they can be used by the student or something. So the training program or the webinars need to be done by the community, and this middle layer enables it, telling the students, saying that you want to know more about what kind of infrastructure we have a couple of information sessions. Right? It is more like library will buy ProQuest, but there will be a representative from ProQuest who will come and do a training about how you use a ProQuest. Alright? So we need to have, if you are able to enable them, and there should be some incentive for these people. If they are located in Chennai, when you do an event in Delhi, you call them. Okay, coming to Delhi, attending this event, going back as an incentive for them. So if you are able to do this, they will enable your enable the access within education institutions. And you are talking about campuses wherein every year you have 3,000, 5,000 people walking in, and you are talking about this. If the tools are good, the infrastructure good, definitely these people start using it.
Sorry,
No, I wasn't really like waiting. I think I took myself out of the equation because the panel was just perfectly happy going on. Super happy. It's a good thing.
When you put three academics in a place, you don't want to ask questions. They will talk themselves.
Yeah, I had one other question in mind, but I think in the favor of time we can take one or two questions. Yeah, one question. Yeah.
So when it comes to so all the talk about incentives makes me think of Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. How do you handle that based on your suggestions?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer, but I feel like there is be some rejigging of the incentives. I don't know what the like.
Could you please repeat the question? I didn't get it correctly.
Goodhart's law says that when a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure.
Because people start gaming that measure.
Because we as, well, humans everywhere, but Indians especially, we have a propensity to hack the system, figure out ways to just get and achieve. Like we will mug up one day before the examination and all of your intense incentives which were there in place for us to actually learn the concept will be thrown out the window. We'll mug it up, give the examination, get good grades, done. So when if, and I think that applies to professors alike, however the incentives that you're proposing actually help what we're trying to do and not end up being gamed by my fellow students.
I'll very quickly tell you our measure. My measure and our measure in our university is not, now they have something called an APR. They do have some standardization measures, such a number of papers and things like that. But it's really what he called talent, but what is defined really as the skills that you impart because of the ecosystem that the university provides. And the skills that the student takes out and has learned in the university is a success. The trajectory of a success post-university should be the measure of the success of the university and of the teacher. Now, given that, let me just go through that. See, what we have to do is we have to plan future skills. It is not a trivial matter. This is not like a college where you have a standardized syllabus, and the syllabus is you're teaching something from a textbook, and that's not going to happen over here. So what you have to do is you have to actually predict the skills required. Let's say if a person is doing a PhD 5 years from now, or he has to fit into the ecosystem that is going to accept him very well. So as an example, see, I mentioned that we had done high performance computing, because building big computers and provisioning them were important. Cloud computing was not so easily available. It wasn't available. We were building those skills. So that the software, people who learned on that, they moved out into managing such facilities in Wipro and other things, simply because they were doing the scientific computing there. So the provisioning of resources was an important thing. The second aspect, what we really have, what I feel now is the problem is that software is not a problem. So even though we keep talking about FOSS, it is because we had an entire community that helped build FOSS. But it's the principles in which FOSS succeeded, and they need to be applied today to areas such as data, open data, and with AI tools. What he summarized just before we actually started the panel, with AI tools. Because these are readily available. For instance, who is going to trust his teacher's voice over ChatGPT? Nobody. And even I don't. And you have this problem. You cannot start preaching to a class for 1 hour when the student just is already asleep because he can go back and use ChatGPT to get the answer. So the point is not so much the answer any longer. Education is about the question. And you have this whole idea about prompt engineering already becoming a skill that students require.
Okay, answer to your question, I partially agree with what you are saying. When you bring in rewards, people are going to beat up the system. But I'm a little bit more optimistic about it. Right? In the sense, there are good people work very hard and get recognized. The rewards lose value. You remove the reward, bring in something else. So we need to keep on doing this. Okay? It's not not standalone, and it is definite, right? You also need to be a little bit more dynamic if you're looking at adoption. That will work.
Thank you, Professor Vigneshra. I think we'll end with that. And I'll also remind one of the policy recommendations, which is we need to evaluate the policy a decade down the line now, and we need to keep doing it so that we are updating the rivers that are in place and ensuring that they're not continuing to be game. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
We just have a few last words from Mr. Venkatesh Hariharan as the closing remarks.
Good to meet you. Sorry I didn't know you before. Good to meet you.
I started by saying that 15 years ago, proprietary software was the norm and open source was the exception. Today the situation is the exact reverse. And when we looked at the reason that we really got this study done is because we wanted to really surface the value of open source. And we felt that there is a little bit of a tragedy of the commons, that anything that's commons property, whether it's air, water, gets taken for granted. We wanted to ensure that it is not taken for granted. We live in a very monetary system, so like we said, let us try and quantify the economic value of open source. We worked really hard to do that, but because many people were just using open source without comparing it with the proprietary alternatives, it's very hard to kind of come up with a metric saying that this is how much they saved, etc., etc. But I think we could uncover a lot of information about how they were using open source, what is the value. Case studies like Zerodha, for example, show that they've saved about $10 million because they meticulously measured the value that they were saving. Some of the startups have not been so meticulous about it. And then when you look at the other values, if you, again going back to the Zerodha example, because of the ability to control the technology, they were able to turn on a dime. When they decided that instead of charging people for every trade, they will make it free, they just had to flip a switch. And that kind of agility has given them a competitive advantage in the market. So I think these were the things that we were able to uncover. But I think at a larger societal level, today I think open source is absolutely critical to India's future. Because if you look at what's happening with the hyperscalers in the US, the AI infrastructure that they are building out, they're going to the extent of saying that AI is going to be treated like nuclear technology. We will, because it can be life-threatening, we will have only some countries that can have access to the technology and embargo the export of AI to other countries. I think that is an absolutely horrifying thought. And unless we build AI commons, unless we build technology in the commons, we will not be able to compete with these organizations, with these geopolitical actors. Therefore, I think in the long run, AI is really critical. I think it's time that the government of India also started looking at AI not as a tactical tool that can help us save money, but as a strategic tool that can help us become a technology superpower, not just a consumer of technology. So with that, I think today's discussions have been very useful in terms of giving us some inputs into how we can leverage industry, academia and government to use open source software in a more strategic fashion. And for that, we thank all of you who have joined us for this roundtable, this seminar. Thank you so much.
So, finally, closing remarks. I would like to thank everybody, all the panelists and all the participants. I understand it's been a long day, right from the beginning till now. Professor Jalote, who was a great support for hosting this event over here. And Venki and Rahul especially, who've been very enthusiastic right from the beginning. And they have been, they were very supportive. So very much thank you to you. And I think in our team, we have Rashi and Shubham. I think they did a great job right from the beginning to this far. Overall, thanks to all of us. Hope to see you all again at some other meet about FOSS. See you.
Open right. Open right.
Doesn't matter, it's sit like you should